matchmaking vCISOs with companies in need, seeking compatibility. And MSSPs need workers too, landing the right person for the job. That and the latest news and trends in the managed security space coming right up on Cyber for Hire.
Building bridges between managed security providers and their clients, it's the podcast where MSPs, vCISOs, and end users take a united stand against cybercrime. This is Cyber for Hire.
Cyber for Hire, the managed security podcast, would like to thank the following initial launch sponsors for supporting our program: Aptega, AT&T Cybersecurity, Cisco, NetSurian, and Stellar Cyber. Be sure to keep watching future episodes for more details on these sponsoring organizations. In the meantime, to learn more about our sponsors, you can visit us at msspalert.com/sponsors for additional information. And of course, be sure to get your fill of timely news and analysis from our partnering digital brands, SC Media, MSSP Alert, and Channel E2E. All right, welcome to episode number 3 of Cyber for Hire. How's everybody doing today? I'm Bradley Barth with SC Media in New York, and joining me as always from the other side of the Continental Divide is my co-host and partner in cybercrime, Ryan Morris, principal consultant with Morris Management Partners. Ryan, it's our 3rd episode, and we're not sick of each other yet. I think that's a good sign.
It's a very good sign. See, the way I look at it, I think we're still in that first week of school phase. Like, we're really paying attention to what clothes we wear and where we sit and who's in which class together. By the time we get to the holiday break, we'll know exactly what we're doing and everything will work professionally. Until then, hey, it's a little bit like a high school project.
Absolutely. The road is only going to get smoother as we go, let's hope. But before we get down to business today, Ryan, I need to warn you, I'm going to try my best to put on a brave face today because I'm actually in a little bit of techno mourning.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, one of my favorite technology innovations of all time was bricked as a service last week or so, approximately. Slingbox. Most of you probably know that Slingbox was a device that you would hook up to your cable box so you could watch your local cable channels on your phone or device wherever you are. And as a big Mets and Jets fan, this was a lifesaver while I was living out in Washington State, rather than subscribing to various streaming services or trying to go through my cable service online. I could just watch by hooking it up to a cable box. I had made a deal with my parents. I said, can I hook this up in your cable box at home in New York while I live out there in Washington and just watch from your cable box? And it was great. And, and I would still use it to this day, even here in New York, when I would go on road trips, conferences. But, with streaming services and options becoming so popular, the business model changed. And, in the tech world, we certainly all understand the pain of certain services getting bricked and reaching end of life. Sometimes they can even pose a serious security threat once they're no longer supported, right? And so with that, Ryan, what I'd like to ask you is there a discontinued product or service out there that you missed most? Something that if you could bring back, you would. It could be tech, it could be anything.
See, I think this is the life experience of an early adopter, right? Those of us who do technology for a living, we are statistically way more likely to be early adopters of gadgets and technologies, things that are not quite ready for prime time when they come out. They're a little glitchy, they're a little less than consumer grade, and we're totally fine with that because not only does it work well enough, but it actually gives us the opportunity to add a little geek to it, right? Like, we can make sure that it works a little bit more effectively. I find that that's inevitable. You're always going to get into a product that's awesome, and then somebody acquires it and discontinues it, etc. I think Sling was one of the smartest services out there, and it created the entire industry of online video streaming. So I will definitely feel you on that one. My personal example, you remember the Sony PSP, right? Not just the PlayStation Portable. Growing up with like very sad examples of handheld computer games, that thing was the first one with a high-res screen, integrated controls. It was brilliant, and Sony did a very good job of bringing big box games over to the small device platform very rich content for that thing. I loved it. It was easy and portable. I spent a disproportionate amount of time on airplanes playing that thing. And then when it went away and there was no more software, I was like, oh, I still have the device. It just doesn't work anymore. And, one of those days, I'll be that
That's it.
Atari guy in the corner, like downloading like old system mods, trying to get that thing back up and running.
That's it. Hang on to it. You never know. Maybe you'll be able to, resurrect it. If I had to name a non-tech answer, I'll give you one of those too. I'll get a little out of the box here, or out of the cereal box. Product 19 cereal. That was my absolute favorite. Kellogg's discontinued it around 2016. It was actually like a healthy cereal that I enjoyed eating. And I remember when they said they were discontinuing it, I held on to those boxes for like dear life, and like savored them like they were gold. And then when it got down to like that last bowl, it was just like a very bittersweet moment of taking those last little scoops of cereal, knowing that like these are the last bites I'll ever take of product 19. Yeah.
We are occasionally beneficiaries of the consumer product industry. We are also destined to be victims of their progress in portfolio. I think taking an inventory position might be a really good idea on some of these things, because you never know when they're just going to discontinue and remind you, you might be the only one who still likes that product. And so it goes away.
That's true. Listen, if anyone knows where I can still get my hands on some leftover product 19, I would be forever grateful. I think only problem with that is that at this point, discontinued in 2016, those boxes would be pretty stale. And right, like as we know, like after a while, there are certain products that after a certain time aren't safe to use anymore. They have reached the end of their shelf life or their life expectancy.
Cereal. Yeah, breakfast cereal qualifies in that category.
Exactly. I don't want to reach the end of my life. I want
to. Not shelf stable by any stretch of the imagination, but we want to hear from you guys out there as well in our audience world. What discontinued products do you sincerely regret being discontinued? Drop us a note on our email, cyber4hire@cyberrisk.com, or visit us on the show page. You can drop some comments and some feedback there. We would love to feature some of your dearly departed technologies as well. So keep the conversation going.
Absolutely. All right. Speaking of discontinuing things, we're going to discontinue this discussion, which has reached its end of life. And with that, it's time for our featured cyber strategy topic of the week, presenting our big idea in security, matchmaking vCISOs with companies in need seeking compatibility. Let's play the dating game. When pairing up a company with a fractional or virtual CISO, there are a lot of factors to consider. Personalities count, as do cyber skills and IT background, industry sector experience, geographical limitations, and the company's stated core objectives. The available IT expertise on the client's corporate payroll also might make a difference. This session will look at how to find a healthy, harmonious match between vCISO and client, and what warning signs to watch out for if the relationship starts to get rocky. We've got plenty of ground to cover, and leading us on this expedition will be Brian Haugli, founder and CEO of the vCISO and cybersecurity services firm SideChannel. Brian has been driving security programs for 2 decades, spearheading programs for the DoD, Pentagon, intelligence community, Fortune 500 companies, mid-market companies, and startups. A cyber professor at Boston College and a contributing author, Brian is a renowned speaker and expert on NIST guidance, threat intelligence implementations, and strategic organizational initiatives. Brian, thanks so much for being with us today.
Brad, thank you so much for having me. Hello, Ryan. Good to see you. Great to be here.
Welcome in, Brian. We are looking forward to some of your expertise, especially as this is becoming such a strategic service offering for the service provider community, right? Above and beyond the technical services we deliver. The concept of strategy and direction, I think it's not just a good business opportunity. There is a tremendous value associated with the actual technical aspects. So we're really looking forward to your insider kind of point of view on not just the biz dev part of how to sell a vCISO relationship, but the technical aspects of how you make sure that's compatible and effective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, there's a lot of facets that go into making that role or that service actually work inside of a client long term, so they can see the value out of what they're procuring.
Yeah. So then, Brian, let's start with this. What makes a relationship between vCISO and the client that vCISO is working with? What makes that relationship compatible or incompatible? What does it often come down to? What does the relationship hinge around?
Right. So I've been kind of across the whole spectrum, and I'll just kind of point this out. Starting and building the company that I'm in, Side Channel, I started out actually just as a solo practitioner. So I've lived that life and I've figured that out, and then now scaling it to offer many different CISOs to many different clients, kind of can see the whole gamut. And what I've learned and what I really see is exactly what you're asking about. Like, how do you get the connection to really work between personalities, right? Cultural fits, understanding and background fits. Manufacturing client might not want the expertise of someone who's coming out of healthcare. Okay, that makes sense. But can that CISO still pivot, right, and provide value as a CISO, regardless of the sector? So I think the good things that really matter around matching that I've seen really kind of come up in discussions, with clients is geography is actually a big deal, and it's mostly probably more for the service provider themselves, for the vCISOs themselves. If you're supporting a client on the West Coast and you're on the East Coast, you have to adjust. If you're on the East Coast supporting West Coast, you have to adjust. The client doesn't have to adjust, right? Because you're never going to ask your client to work around your schedule, right? If you're doing a product, because this is services. So services, it's client first, right? It's customer first. So to keep you happy, if you're going to be in that role, you really need to kind of think, okay, well, where do I want to work, right? You're probably not picking up, multiple time zones away and thinking you're going to be effective over the long term. So that's probably one tip for anyone going into the vCISO space to think about themselves. Two, obviously the expertise. That's probably the largest component. While the first one is more of just pain to kind of work through, the biggest one is, do you actually have the expertise in the space to service the clients that you're working with? Again, I kind of joked, manufacturing can't really fully use a healthcare CISO. While that's not entirely true, there actually is some truth to it. Manufacturing is going to have very specific risks and threats, even regulations that it's going to be held to. Do you, providing that service to them, do you know about that? Or are you about to read up on that before you start day one? That's probably not it. So experience matters when it comes to this, right? I don't think the vCISO role is a safe place for either the buyer or the provider to be if they have never been a CISO. That's always been my thinking. I know that's a little controversial, but again, I believe experience really matters in this role because of who you're talking to, right? And what you're talking about. You're talking to boards, private equity, customers, key customers. You're talking to the C-suite about risk to their organization. Can you have just, drawn on your days of being a network engineer, maybe a director, maybe you've managed people, maybe not. You've never sat in a boardroom, but now you're going to be a vCISO and you're going to walk in and do all these things? I'm sorry, I don't think so. You can. I just don't think you're going to get very far, and I don't think you're going to be as effective. So having that experience, not only being the CISO, but having that experience in those sectors that client that you're working with, that all just kind of really makes the service very, very powerful. And remember, the people who are buying this service from you, whether it's fractional, vCISO, as a service, it's called a lot of different names. Their expectation is you are coming to the plate with that experience, with that knowledge. You are there to take the pain away from them that they are feeling around not knowing what to do around cybersecurity. So you should be in a very, very good position to actually be able to do that. This should not be, the type of thing that you just pick up and say, hey, I want to be a vCISO tomorrow because I took a 300-hour class at this college or through this certification program and I have no background in it, but now I can. It's like, yeah, I don't know. I've run into that and I've seen that, and it's like, oh, who's buying this?
I think you are uncomfortably close to the real truth, right? I think in our industry, we recognize that if we are taken seriously at the strategy level, then the likelihood that the client will follow and implement our recommendations on systems and tools and services, that probability skyrockets, right?
Of course.
If you will pay me for my brain to give you strategy advice, then by default, when it comes to you should buy this tool instead of that tool, of course you're going to trust me that much, right? I think that's a really good piece of advice that we need to be taken seriously. And I also very much echo your advice on time zones in a remote or hybrid working world. The best way I can put it is whatever time the client says it is. And we adjust and we get up early and stay up late when necessary. Credibility, though, that's where I want to dig in with you, Brian. The question of strategy, understanding technology, understanding security, being an actual expert in the right way to solve a security vulnerability. That's one piece of your bag, right? The other side is whether or not they believe you, whether or not they take you seriously as an advisor. And as you said, don't come here and learn what my problems are and then figure out the right way forward. Understand the landscape and show me the right way to the future. How much does vertical industry play into that? You touched on it with kind of a reference to manufacturing and healthcare. As I look at it, we saw a story covered recently on MSSP Alert that said roughly 95 to 98% of applications have outdated or misconfigured updates and patches, right? Infrastructure is one thing, and it's a massive challenge. Applications, 98% of them have some vulnerability, and those applications are generally not just, Word and Excel. These are business applications. How much do you think vertical market focus plays into the credibility piece?
Quite a bit, because again, you need to understand the pain of the client, and they're not paying you to come in, like you said, we've touched on here. They're not paying you to come in and learn about manufacturing or healthcare while you're helping them. They want you to come in and understand, because a lot of clients will ask this. I've heard this. I'm sure you've heard this too. And it's a bit of a bane to cyber professionals, right? When you're talking to the C-suite or the board, and this question comes up: what are my competitors doing? And like every time I'm always like, you really shouldn't care what they're doing. You should focus on what you need to do. But a lot of buyers and a lot of industries think about what their competition. No one really wants to be a early adopter on certain things. They want to be fast followers. Everyone wants to be fast followers. This is huge in insurance. No one wants to be leaders unless you're literally CNA, travelers, or whatever. Everybody else wants to be incredibly fast followers. No one wants to be a laggard, because that's just a reason for lawsuits. But this actually plays out really well in other verticals, right? Where they'll say that, well, what are my competition doing? What's everybody else in the sector doing? I want to do that. So I'm not outside, the box. And what's interesting is that whatever other people are doing never actually means you're going to be doing better security. It just means you're doing as good as them. So my approach has always been, listen, we're gonna have the expertise on who you are, right? In the area that you're in. We're gonna bring that in. That's not a problem. But we are gonna spend a little bit of time to better understand, why are you? What makes your business your business? Why are you different from your competitors? That's the question you should be asking. And then how do we protect that? Let's not protect the commonality of you being a healthcare or a health tech organization. Let's focus on the protection of what gives you a competitive advantage. Because honestly, from a business perspective, that's the thing that matters the most to the C-suite and leadership is, oh, well, we're in business because we're building, this competitive product that is completely different from anyone else. It's what sets us apart. Wouldn't you want to protect that first and foremost over everything else? Because that's the reason someone's going to buy you over your competition. So that's the type of thinking that, when I talk to people, I want them to really kind of have. And sometimes I'm giving them that type of thinking, because most people coming around, CFOs, our clients usually come to us, CFOs, CEOs, CTOs. And they basically say, I don't know what I need to do around cybersecurity. I just know I need to do the right thing. I need a risk management capability. I know I need it, but I don't know how to get there. And it's almost like they're asking me, tell me the right questions I should be asking you. And then I'll be able to better figure out if you're the one I want to work with based on how you led me through that journey. So I want to go back to your first question. I think the biggest component that makes a CISO, a vCISO, a virtual CISO, fractional CISO, very effective is their ability to be a consultant first, right? I have worked with and had a number of former enterprise CISOs working for me and working with me. The best ones are not the smartest CISOs, the most savvy security experts. The best ones are the ones who are the best consultants first. And that's because they know how to lean in and ask those questions and find out, what are you really asking about? What is it your real fear is? What's your real problem? Let me unearth that. And now I know what the problem is that you want me to solve. And then that's the thing that makes you that trusted agent, that honest broker, Ryan, that you were asking about, where they come back and say, listen, this is a great strategy. We're going to follow it. This is great advice for how to tactically implement those things. We're going to do it. Now tell me what products and solutions I should be using. Lead me. Show me the way. That's how you get to be that person that is so indispensable, because you have very, very good consulting skills. And I think that's kind of paramount to the role. It's not just subject matter expertise. It's purely that consulting aspect.
And that certainly brings a lot of credibility to that C-suite, right? That's who they're accustomed to talking to. That's who they're comfortable paying. I think you make a killer point, and then I'll let Bradley jump in here with his next question. Common practice versus best practice, right? What is everybody else doing is the answer of the mean or the average in your marketplace. And if you do what everybody else does, you kind of get what everybody else gets. Best practice, by definition, is rare. It's not what all of your peers are doing. It is different and better. And it goes back to your comment about what makes you unique and different. Let's lean into that stuff. Bradley, jump in here with your next question.
Sure. Yeah, no worries. Actually, Brian, I want to go back to a point that you made a little bit earlier in the interview about geography being a factor. As you know, Ryan also astutely pointed out, we are living in a world of remote and hybrid remote models. And, you know, you can do things like remotely patch, and you can do a lot from really any remote location. So has this new world that we found ourselves in reduced the barriers for vCISOs to be able to work with a client that might be on the other side of the country? Or do you still find that a lot of clients working with vCISOs really prefer to have somebody within proximity because they do want them to be able to be on-prem, now and then?
It's a great question, and one that I would have thought definitely would have been a predominant remote falling back to in person. But when I started Side Channel in 2018, we were fully remote through 2019. We pre-pandemic, fully 100% remote capability, working with clients everywhere. I'm in the Boston area. I had clients back in 2018, 2019 in Boston. I never went to their offices. And then pandemic hit, and it was like, okay, now everyone's forced remote. Almost we were better positioned because we were so accustomed to being remote that we were able to operate through that. But now that we're coming out of that, and I'm seeing this actually in some of the other areas, the solo practitioners that I know that are vCISOs, there's not a big ask to come in anywhere, right? And I think the reasons are because, you're expecting someone to come in as this role to bring this service to you, who's going to spend a lot of time listening. So you can do that on the phone or do it on Zoom. Go away, come up with a strategic plan, and then come back to you, listen some more, find out some more, ask some more questions, right? All not necessarily requiring, kind of just doing fact-finding. Very objective, not part of the company culture, fact-finding. What's going on inside this organization? Let me get some deep truth. You can do 99.9% of that without having to sit down. Is it easier to sit down with people and have? Sure is, no doubt. But it's a lot cheaper if you don't have to fly me to be at your locations, right? Because most vCISOs are going to charge the expenses for travel. I'm much more effective and quicker to do it because I don't have to travel. And some of us who have our service models built this way, it's just a lot easier to actually deliver in a remote fashion. So if I'm able to create a strategic vision for you to now talk about, maybe I come on site and present that to you and your C team when we go over the whole enchilada, right? The whole thing. But do I need to do that for all of that work up to that point? Probably not. And I don't see a lot of, at least from what I'm seeing, like no one's really calling us in to be like, hey, can you come in? Now we do that from time to time, big clients, very important discussions. When there's M&A involved, right? The entity we're working with is doing M&A. Maybe we need to get involved with the lawyers and be in closed door rooms and be part of that so we can help with the due diligence. But outside of that, there's not really a big draw, both either from the client or a want from the professionals to say, yeah, I want to go live on a plane again. Like a lot of people kind of get into this. I don't know if you see folks who are getting into and becoming vCISOs. It's former CISOs, it's former senior security leaders who have done that work inside of enterprise a long time. They've lived on planes. They've not seen their families. Most of these folks are kind of late career. So they want a better lifestyle. And I don't think traveling a ton, being away from their family, which they have already been doing, is kind of what they want to sign up for when they now want to be this virtual CISO. They want that flexibility. They want that better balance. So I think from both sides, both the buyer and the seller, there's not this big push to get back in person.
It's a great point. And there are some barriers in the remote, right? A screen between us means that presence and substance, body language might be a little bit muted, but I think you can accomplish those things. It's not a question of whether or not remote works. It's a question of whether or not we can do remote effectively, right? It's an us question. I want to dig into some of the content or the substance of the engagements. If you think about a typical vCISO relationship, if you're talking about business strategy and understanding who they are and where they want to go, if you're talking about cybersecurity strategy and how we solve these problems, how much of your time do you spend talking about money, right? Our industry, we love to say the phrase ROI. Well, it's got a great ROI. It's got a great value proposition. But we tend to use that as like a list of bullet points and words, not necessarily a math problem with actual numbers. Curious your perspective on the depth of financial understanding and the ability to communicate to a CFO, et cetera, on the topic of money.
Yeah, so a lot of the presentation I've seen and been part of into clients in this space, when they're looking for ROI, no one's asking about the marketing material that the EDR solution came out with and said, we reduce, real time to whatever by 17%. Like nobody cares. Like, I'm sorry, but nobody cares about that marketing. No one's looking to reduce their, mean time to exposure, their mean time to response by 15, 20%. What people are doing and what they really want to address are a few things, because the catalyst for why this engagement or the CISO, even a full-time CISO, exists is because I've figured out like one of four things. There's a regulation that requires a security program be in existence. There is zero ROI discussion around that. The ROI is if you don't do this, it's wear orange or pay money, right? No one.
Excellent.
So there is no ROI. So regulation is one. Two, you have a customer that is basically saying, I will not give you my revenue if you don't have a security program that you can articulate. And so I guess the ROI there is, how much is that revenue worth to us, right? As an organization. I've seen clients who are like, we could literally, this one customer could be $5 million a year. So I predominantly focus on mid-market companies. So their types of customers are, not these huge, $100 million deals. It's $5 million of revenue to those customers. That's a lot, right? And that's a big thing for them to go, I need a security program to put in place. So regulation, customers, the board actually is like, hey, there's a lot of pressure coming on the board members. We now need to start asking about cybersecurity. Where is that? Again, still no ROI, because the board is going to go, all right, CFO, if you don't start making moves and don't start enabling that CISO over there, we're going to find another CFO who does. So the ROI for the CFO is his job, his or her job. Same thing with the CEO. I've seen that pressure come down. The last one is insurance. And insurance, I think there's almost a negative ROI whenever you start talking about cybersecurity and where it is, right? We want insurance to cover the things that we're not doing. Well, what are you not doing? Everything. Okay, well, you're not going to get insurance to cover the fact that you're not doing anything. All right, well, we need to implement certain things so that we can then get insurance. And having come out, so I was the CISO at a Fortune 500 insurance company, so I've seen the inside and outside of this whole thing play out, help them build out cyber policies. The reality is that while it's great that insurance is a catalyst to make people want to build cyber programs, it should be the other way around. You should be, because transfer is only one of the four ways to address risk. You should be building out a cyber program, then going, okay, here's the three things that we can't do. That's the conversation we bring and say, that's why we have insurance. Because people I think people have been accustomed to and trained now to want to buy cyber insurance like auto insurance. We fill out an application, send it over the thing. Hopefully I get accepted. It's like, oh, I got rejected. Why? Because you literally you're treating it like auto insurance. That's not how this works. You need to showcase what you're doing very well and be able to carry that narrative to the broker to be able to then say, hey, this is why I need you to cover me on these 3 gaps that I'm not doing, which, by the way, they will not be indefinitely open. Here's my plan to go address those. But in case all the stuff I did, say I adopted NIST CSF as my framework to build a security program, right? I'm a big NIST CSF fan. That's what my book was about. If I did all 108 controls, great. If somehow something failed inside of that, that's where insurance should kick in. Insurance shouldn't kick in because I never implemented MFA. Like, that's not how this works. So back to your question, like I when I hear ROI, I'm always just like, what are you really asking about? And clients, it's usually because of those 4 things, and then you can kind of divert, like, yes, if you implemented this EDR solution, your ROI is going to be X. Like, you can't figure that out. I'm sorry, you just can't. And you got to take this approach because that's what people really want to go do. But we are very much involved in and should be involved in setting the budget, whether it's working with the CIO, the CTO, or whomever it is. Hey, here's how much this is going to be. But that should be objectively created based on gaps that you have identified inside of your current state on your path to your target state, right? So NIST is CSF 108 controls. Well, you don't have to do all 108. You could say, listen, these 100 or these 99, these are the ones we want to adopt. Those 9, they're not applicable to us, and here's the reasons. Fine, move those off. So 99 should be our target state. We're doing 89 of them, which means we have 10 to do. So I now have to, this is like simple math, but like I have to meet and figure out how to address those 10 gaps. Okay, now I know where my direction should be on what to go purchase. What should I go fund? Based on control objectives, based on control gaps, not based on, oh, that's a cool thing. I want to use that in my environment. Or the old, I saw this work in my last place. We should totally do that here. It's like, well, if the thing that you're going to implement and bring over from your last organization does 70% of what you already have in your organization, you're kind of wasting money, right? You're not getting enough. So people need to start really thinking about when they're building out programs and thinking about budget, focusing more on what am I doing against the controls and the gaps that have been identified, not just, anecdotal or being swayed by marketing or being swayed by a VAR about, hey, this product or that product. It's like, what do those products actually do for the controls I'm trying to build the program against? You need to figure out that way. That enables you, sorry to like wrap this up here, but that actually enables you to have the conversation that you can actually have with the CFO. Because when you start talking about like FAIR or like any of the other risk qualification or quantification, that whole math equation, I'm sorry, but like you have to train the CFO on what that even means, okay? And 2, they need to believe you. They're not going to spend their time doing any of that stuff. Like they're not going to do it. Not in the mid-market. I rarely see it work in the enterprise. So having a control-based kind of approach allows you to actually have that conversation with the CFO where they can go, okay, the thing you're going to buy that you need $100,000 is going to do 8 of the 10 controls that we have gaps on. I get that. That makes sense. Okay. That's an easier discussion.
Brian, I teased a question in my intro. I want to ask you really quick, but we are short on time, so this needs to be sort of like a lightning round answer,
Sure.
sort of your 30-second answer. I do want to know, we've been talking a lot about the factors that go into what makes a relationship compatible between a vCISO and the client, but what are the warning signs to look for in terms of maybe the visions not aligning, that there starts to be a little bit of a clash between what the organization wants to do and what the vCISO wants to do? And in those situations, how do you know what approach to take in terms of, do you change the voice? Do you bring in someone new? Do you even potentially, fire the client?
Yeah, so I think the first one is if you ever run into the CTO, the CIO, whoever's been wearing the security hat, right, for a long time, and now you're coming in and you're taking that over, if they're immediately not willing to give that up, if they're just like, oh, why are you even here? My boss is the one who hired me. Why are you here? Once you start seeing that dynamic, you know you're going to be in for something. So you need to either work around that right? And because you're there for a reason. You were hired there for a reason. Most of my clients, it's been the board or the C-suite that have hired me or us in. So I know why we're there. We're there because we have top-down support for this. So looking for those pieces. Anytime that you get if you catch the scent that you are there just to be a compliance play, leave. That will not be a good long-term customer. If you need the money, fine, but you got to live with yourself that's why you're there, and you got to be ready to ride that train all the way to the end. Because if you're just there as compliance, you're never going to see anything get done. You're never going to see the budget get put in place by that client. It's not going to be professionally fulfilling for you to actually take them on as a client. So, and you might actually have some liability, because if they're not doing the things you're telling them and you're in the CISO role, you might find yourself on the wrong end of a lawsuit or some type of, something that could jeopardize your time and everything else. We've fired clients. I've let clients go because I've told them, because we've figured out we're just here as a compliance play, and I just don't do that. Right. So you've got to either be willing to terminate that relationship. You've got to be willing to, maybe if it's a cultural thing, like your person and their point of contact just don't get along, and you have a bench and you can bring in another CISO to do it, do that. Obviously try to work relationships top down. But, I think it's just like any consulting arrangement. It's you have to work through it if you feel like if you can work through it. And if it's not, just call it like it is and just get out.
Excellent insights. And again, you'll notice, Brian, I'm taking notes over here because I love how you're translating this into, these are the 4 justifications. These are the very tactical reasons. That's exactly the kind of hands-on stuff we want to bring to our audience. So thank you very much for getting deep and practical there. Before we let you go, we have one more quick segment that we want to do with you. We call it We Speak Geek. Our objective is to get to know each of our guests just a little bit better. And obviously, we do what we do in this industry for very voluntary reasons. We like complicated things. We like nerdy things. And it's not always about software and technology. Brian, in your world, where do you nerd out? What is it that you have way more interest in than the average Joe?
Yeah, no, thanks. I have a couple things. And what's funny, the string between all of them is they're all very analog. So I like working on cars, and I have a vinyl collection. And nice. What's really nice about that is because I love music, but I almost loathe downloading anything to my iPod. So I have a pretty vast vinyl collection. I've got another CISO friend, Mike Packard, who's the CISO. He and I have worked together for a number of years. His vinyl collection far outweighs mine. We've been record heads for a long time. DJs for a long time as well. So getting very analog on that. But yeah, I have a couple Technique 1200 Mark Vs, which are record players, using the now out, no longer produced. You're talking about something earlier about product that is no longer around. The Shure M44-7 needle, which is was the predominant needle of choice by huge DJs for forever. They don't make them anymore. And just the weight of the needle and the way that it sounds and the pickup on everything, plus the ability to, when you actually scratch or mix between records, you can, they're just a phenomenal needle. I will take that position. I know other DJs out there will have their opinion of like the Auraphone or the other ones, but those are the ones I went to. So, yeah, I like that. Collect a lot of classic rock, have the entire catalog for the Beatles, Rolling Stones, Who, Pink Floyd, Zeppelin, Boston, the Eagles. I really just enjoy putting on a record, listening to it in the mornings with coffee, and then just collecting records. It's fun to get out to record stores and just sift through and find things that I have. And it's kind of like comic book collecting, but I get to listen to what I buy, which is nice.
All right, I'm going to ask you the cliched question, right? The philosophical question of stranded on a desert island, and what's like the one record then that you get to take with you and listen to? What's it going to be?
Goat's Head Soup by the Rolling Stones. I can listen to that album front to back anytime. I don't know why, but I love it. I mean, 100 Days, Dancing with Mr. D's, just phenomenal record to just listen to. It's I think probably one of the Stones' best. But the coolest record I've ever seen is actually another Stones record. It's Sticky Little Fingers, and it's a picture of Jagger's pants, but it's got a real zipper built into the album cover.
Excellent. See, now the fact that you have those kinds of detailed answers about the records, the equipment and the technology, as well as a quick answer for the one you would take to the island, that proves you are a bona fide geek in that category. So congratulations.
Thanks. I'll wear that. I'll wear that hat proudly.
All right. Well, very cool, Brian. I appreciate you sharing that with us. So thanks for that. And thanks for joining our program today. That's Brian Haugli from SideChannel. As far as everyone else, don't go anywhere. It's not the end of our show. We're only halfway done. Please return for the second half of our episode featuring our MSP business and industry topic of the week, our InfoSec News Rundown, and our Dear Cyber for Hire advice column segment. See you in a moment on the other side.